The South African Nuclear Energy Corporation has received two disclaimers of opinion from the Auditor General's Office about its annual report since 2018. The disclaimers revealed that the Auditor General did not obtain sufficient evidence to verify its cash flows. Like other South African state-run firms, Necsa has been marred in financial and operational crises. Last month, Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe appointed 7 new board members. Necsa Chairperson David Nicholls is my guest tonight. David, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for coming in. So, not a pretty picture that we're getting about Necsa. Give us your assessment of the state of the organisation today.
Oh, that's a long answer. I'm going to start with a caveat, of course. One has to start with caveats, and that's that I've only been in the job for just under a month now, and I came with almost without warning. I think the company has got a number of issues. Clearly, there appears to be a governance issue. I say that merely from the state of the accounts, which would appear to indicate a governance issue, which we're clearly trying to address with a new permanent full-size board. And there's clearly a lot of financial issue on the company in terms of its situation. That financial issue, as far as I can see, was largely driven by a shutdown of the isotope production by the NNR about 18 months ago, which impacted the overall cash flow of the company to the tune of about R1 billion over the last 2 years. So yes, there are challenges, but I think that there is a reasonably solid future going forward, and I think we do see a way out of that. But still, it's very early days for the new board, and certainly for myself, I was a bit shocked to be appointed.
And in its expression, the Energy Department had said that it's hoping for a more stable or stabilised Necsa in the current financial year. Given what you just outlined, is that doable?
Well, I think that when I came in, the first question was, could we actually pay salaries for the next few months? And I think we paid salaries last month. We're reasonably confident we'll do it again this month, and I think there's every chance that we'll achieve it next month. So we'll keep the bills paid until the beginning of the next financial year, which clearly is important to the company, because that's the point at which the...
This is April, am I right?
Yes, March 31st is the end of the financial year. Because clearly the government funding comes as which is part of the income of Necsa, comes as a grant during the coming year. We've used up this year's grant. So yeah, it's a challenge. The biggest thing is getting stability and vision. Stability in the organisation, so they believe they know that people are in place for a long time. And secondly, a vision of saying where we're taking the company, and confidence that the company's view and the government's view is aligned.
Just on paying the bills then, I remember in December there was quite a lot of alarm around what was at the time said to be a looming inability to pay salaries. You say you've now been able to pay wages and keep the lights on. How are you keeping afloat?
Oh, we're in discussion. At the moment, we're working very hard to find where there are funds in the company which can be used. And for longer term, we're talking both to DMRE and to banks about the way forward of funding the turnaround strategy of the company.
One of the other things, I mean, it was one of the unions, I think, late last year, they were talking about a sum of 325 million rand. This was a cash flow projection of a negative 325 million rand for 2019-2020. How accurate is that number?
I really can't comment at this stage. We're currently working on the principle that we are able to pay we have enough cash and cash available to us to pay our bills and our wages for this year.
There was that falling out, of course, between the Minister Gwede Mantashe, and the board members who were sacked, resigned, whatever you call it, in January. How extensive is the Minister's involvement and powers over Necsa currently? Oh,
you've got two different discussions there. You said how extensive are his powers and how extensive is his interference?
Yes, both.
His powers, I believe, are extremely extensive. He is the minister, he is a shareholder, he can issue shareholder instructions if he feels to do so. So in that sense, like any company, the shareholder owns a company. In terms of interference, I've had essentially no interference. I've had an instruction to fix the company and get the company back on a level playing field, on a level even keel, but I certainly haven't received a series of instructions from any part of government at this stage.
And how do you intend to go about preventing any sort of interference going forward, at least during your term?
Oh, I think the interference comes because you're not seen to be achieving the targets given by your shareholder. And quite simply, the answer is therefore that we have to make sure that our overall vision is aligned with that of the government through DMRE, and then make sure we achieve that.
We're hearing testimony now currently at the State Capture Inquiry from people at the other SOEs, the likes of Eskom, the likes of South African Airways, about how people at a personal level were impacted by all of the wrongdoing that was going on. Your assessment of the feeling among workers and managers at Necsa today, are they optimistic about what the future holds?
I suspect at the moment morale is not very good, because of when someone starts saying in the press that we may not pay your salaries for the next few months, that would impact anyone's morale. And so I really can't comment on it in the detail. I've spoken to the unions, and I'll clearly be talking to management. I haven't seen any great level of depression, but I've seen a great desire to have a common vision going forward on how we take this company forward. And there's a number of issues in that, which are both require which, like all good companies, it both requires some strategic thinking and some grassroots work, and you can't have only one of them.
Are you able to put a time frame on how long it'll take to get things right?
I think the first question is what's right. I'll comment that I've said to people that I see that I came in and I identified 4 predominant themes of what we're doing going forward, and they're all starting now. Some are shorter terms than others. The first clearly was just to get the money in so that we could pay the salaries, because there's nothing more demoralising than having no salary. I can guarantee you that would be a morale killer. The second one is that there are 2 main subsidiaries of Necsa, and that's called NTP, which makes the isotope for export, and Pelchem, which does fluorochemicals. Both those companies have had historical problems, and so the next challenge is to get them back on the correct footing. In the case of NTP, for example, the plant is back in full production, but clearly having had a hiatus in supply for a year or so has led many of the customers to be less. It's recovering the customers they had previously. So that'll take about another 12 months to get them back in. Pelchem is a fluorochemical department, and their biggest problem is they've got their customers are solid, but their actual production processes is based on 40-year-old machinery, which hasn't been invested in. So it's refurbishing that. That's the second stage, is to get them back in. The third stage is to me, and I've been going through with the different teams these things, is what can we do to look into the future and expand the current operations and the current facilities to get a better income and a more stable future. And then lastly is a little bit more of the blue sky stuff of where do we see Necsa in 10 years' time, and what do we do for that? Things like replacing the Safari reactor, things like expanding the fluorochemical industry quite markedly, and so on.
David Nicholls, thank you so much for your time tonight.